post-experiment discussion panel. Thank you for joining us. Today we're exploring the post-results analysis with an esteemed group of water scientific researchers discussing the details around a water experiment and water ceremony. You can also review the results on AquaPsy.com under the Results tab, at which you can see the effect that we made. And just quickly here, you can see the background measurement is very stable over many hours. And during the impact window here, marked in gray, you can see quite a significant impact. And so what does that mean? How does that translate into an effect from the conscious observer into a water system? All these questions will be answered in this panel discussion. Please enjoy.
Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Lindsay from Water Peace Project, and thank you everyone for joining us in exploring the power of consciousness through water-based science. And our mission at Water Peace Project is to inspire and educate the importance of water for the purpose of peace. And our focus is to support the advancement of water and consciousness-based sciences. So for today's discussion, we've invited a panel of experts in both water and consciousness-based research. And today they're going to briefly explain their amazing work and what they're doing and how we're able to explore the unusual consciousness phenomenon by scientifically measuring subtle changes in water. And our topic for today's discussion will be the results from our global water ceremony at Water Peace Project that we do every month. We've been doing it for 10 years. People join from all around the world for a collective consciousness experiment, and we conducted that with AquaPsy. And we had a really great turnout where we're all collectively focusing on the same object, and in this case, it was the water sample. So let's get started. I know everyone's really eager to see the results of our experiment. So I'd first like to do a quick introduction with everyone, starting with our Water Peace Project Scientific Advisory Board. We have Dr. Kumunga Andrahanetti from COM, and Kumunga's research and PhD was based on how the water element affects our consciousness. And Kumunga is also one of the very few people who are trained and certified in water crystal photography at Dr. Masaru Emoto's lab in Tokyo. And she trained under Dr. Yasuyuki Nemo, and he is also here joining us today. So please welcome Kumunga. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you everybody for coming together and organizing this. Thank you.
Welcome, thank you. And I'd also like to please welcome our scientific advisors, Jeremy Pfeiffer and Anton Fedorenko. Hi guys, thank you for joining us.
Hi Lindsay and everyone, thanks for having us.
Hi Lindsay and everyone, thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Oh, good. And Anton and Jeremy's research is based on how consciousness affects water and by scientifically measuring and analyzing the subtle changes. And today I'm actually excited to make a special announcement because I would like to extend a warm welcome to Anton for joining our Water Peace Project team as a scientific advisor on the board. So we're super grateful for your resonance and collaboration. So thank you, Anton.
Thank you very much for inviting me to doing that.
We're really grateful, so thanks. And I'd like to introduce our special guest today, and it really means a lot to all of us to have you here. So sincerely thank you. And we'll start with Dr. Serge Kernbacl from the Neurocognitive Research and Advanced Robotics and Environmental Sciences, all the way from Germany. And Serge developed the device that we used for our experiment, and he also operates the lab where these experiments are conducted. So please welcome Dr. Serge Kernbacl. Thank you so much for joining us.
Many thanks for the invitation. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, thank you. And we also, a really special warm welcome from my Hado family member, Dr. Yasuyuki Nemo from Office Masaru Emoto in Tokyo, Japan. And Dr. Nemo was the scientific advisor to Dr. Emoto, and he specializes in water and consciousness-based sciences and technologies, such as water crystal photography. And both Kumunga and I studied with Dr. Nemo at Hado School, and when I had organized for Dr. Dr. Emoto to speak at the Scientific Water Conference, and unfortunately he got sick 2 years in a row and he couldn't go. I had gone on his behalf the first year, and Dr. Nemoto went on the second time and he presented. So I'm really grateful for that. So thank you so much. It really opened up our community. So welcome from Tokyo. Thank you.
Oh, Lindsay, thank you for your kind introduction. Yeah, I'm from Tokyo, Japan. Now it's in the early morning, and I'm happy to see all of you at once, here on the screen. Thank you very much.
We're so happy to see you also. It really warms my heart. So, and it means a lot also for the future for us to come together with this intention to support and advance consciousness-based water science. So I'd like to open the discussion to Serge. And Serge, we're super fascinated by your work, and I'm hoping you could just elaborate and tell us a little bit about how you're exploring consciousness using device-based feedback, and with regards to your collaboration with Anton at AquaPsy and Jeremy, and also our experiment results. So thank you so much for sharing this information.
Many thanks. Here in Germany, it's deeply night. It's visible. I will start properly with a short introduction, how it's work and which methodology and technology do we use in that experiments. We use standard impedance spectroscopy. So in water samples, we measuring thermochemical and electrochemical dynamics. So it incorporates a lot of very different phenomena, inclusive quantum phenomena, about 5 different quantum phenomena. And this dynamic is very sensitive to a lot of local and, let's say, non-local effects. And we have to stabilize all local phenomena and hoping to see some changes correlated with some, let's say, distant effects. We measuring its differentially, so in 2 samples, and data are processed in this small unit, and then we use a computer to store it, to distribute over the internet. And it is very important, we receive real-time feedback. It's the feedback is from a running device, and here it's visible electrochemical dynamics. The device is continuously running, it accumulates all the statistics all the time, and we see here a calculation of electrochemical data, of thermochemical data, and we can see more or less the changes over the time. And so it's important, like I said, we see really a real-time feedback. So if I induce, let's say, some mental changes or focus my attention on these water samples, it's very important that I really see in real time these changes. And now we use this feedback device, and the second feedback device is an EEG, and we can correlate our consciousness stage, or train specific consciousness state, and train which correlation they induce in water samples. That is more or less the whole story. How it's work. Here the whole development started in 80s. It's really a long-time development by a large group of people. We developed this project now in this stage and take from our preceders. And develop technology and methodology. We developed more or less 7 specific techniques for using this device-based feedback. And we are conducting now seminars trying to explain for different people how to use it. Probably a little bit for experiment now, yeah? Explanation how it's working, the concrete case of this experiment. In experiment, it's very important that if people focus their attention on this device, and distance in our observation could be very, let's say, very large. It's not limited to local case. In local case, the difficulty level is the lowest. It's the results much more evident. But in fact, if we focus, for instance, attention very large distance, then we can use it a kind of long distance device with feedback over the internet. Here is very important that we fix all local conditions, temperature, radio frequency emission, and we record all these parameters also in real time. I will share my screen now. And here, this exactly this experiment that was conducted at 11th of August. And in the laboratory, here we have a lot of running devices. There's 8 devices, and we record all this data in parallel. And then calculate statistics from different devices. So important, like I said, it's to stabilize environmental condition. And here, so that if we see any changes in the electrochemical dynamics, so that we can exclude local factors as being responsible for the changes. And the first important local parameter is the temperature, and we see the stable temperature. Here was the time of this experiment. We see no changes, no essential anomalies. Here is a radio frequency emission, so that, for instance, here we see all the kind of uniform trend, no large spike during this experiment. Though this cannot be explained that, for instance, somebody ran over the laboratory with a mobile phone and spoke at the time. This also artifact through power supply, air pressure, magnetic and accelerometer data. In total, we record about 30 different parameters from each device. Okay, there was a condition for local environment. The environment was stable. Here, experimental result in this time. And we have to express two hypotheses. First of all, that if people focus their attention on the specific water samples, then we expect that exactly during this time, so this correlation is very important. So these changes, they really appear at the time of focusing their attention. And our first hypothesis is that if focusing attention of many people, then we should observe some changes. We indeed observe this. And the second hypothesis, we have some public devices and non-public devices, and it is kind of entanglement between different devices. And the second hypothesis, what we expressed in the experiment last time, that not only targeted devices will respond, but also non-targeted devices that work at long time together, that will also respond. And first, and we analyze electrochemical dynamics and thermochemical dynamics. And more or less what we see in the result, this typical the one of this public sensor what we use for AquaPsy platform. We see exactly at the time changes in the trend, and one channel that focus was attention, this channel that demonstrate larger deviation from the zero line as a second channel. We analyze these changes for 24 hours. I will show this. So we calculate numerical parameters and analyze these changes of the behavior for the sensor during 24 hours. And of course, there is a random fluctuation of low-level parameter. So, and you can see this is, let's say, probability within this range. They are random, more or less. And this change.
Sorry, Serge, we don't see your screen with the results. We see still those same parameters. I think you need to stop screen sharing and start screen sharing. Yeah, now we can see.
Okay.
So you need to start from the beginning explaining this results.
I'm sorry for this.
We can edit it.
It's a little bit confusing, yeah. Then again, we have here public devices and non-public devices, and in the laboratory we had 4 public devices that work for AquaPsy platform, and a lot of devices, other hidden devices that are not, let's say, we do not publish images or any data from these devices. And for this experiment at 11, we expressed it to hypothesis. The first hypothesis was that if people focus their attention on one of these water samples, then we should observe changes in the electrochemical dynamics. We performed a lot of different experiments, and in the last time we expressed the second hypothesis about these devices. If they work a long time together in one laboratory, they get somehow correlated kind of entanglement, and so we should see changes also in the non-targeted devices. And here the public device electrochemical dynamics. And exactly at the time, this was an experiment, online experiment, and we see changes of electrochemical dynamics. We express this deviation as numbers, and then analyze this dynamic over last 24 hours. Here it's more visible. Here are psi values, so-called psi values, and each of psi values has a specific probability of appearance. And we see, for instance, the values with low psi, they have much higher probability. So we can say that, for instance, in this region, all these values they can be produced by a random event. Now, if we compare this during this psi value during the experiment, we see this is the highest value for the last 24 hours. So the probability that this let's say result is obtained in the random way is very, very low in this case. And we associate for all this result, first of all, this numerical value that is related to this deviation, how strong is this deviation from zero line, and then we associate probability that this deviation is a random deviation. So all these results, they are characterized by psi, and we call it second value probability of being a random event. And here it's a little bit more detailed. We see exactly this peak disappear exactly during this experiment, and we can see even more exact time. This resolution is about 5 minutes resolution, though the most intensive influence appeared about 17:15 in our local time. In the first. The second, let's say, interesting result is a non-targeted device. So people they did not see this image, but in this non-targeted device we also observe quite a strong change. And if we analyze in the same way, this dynamics is in fact the second largest dynamic in the 24 hours. So in the first 12 hours is the highest, and 24 the second highest. Though both hypotheses are confirmed, also interesting observation is related to thermochemical reaction. Though this is, all electrochemical reactions that are endothermic or exothermic, they produce a little bit of energy or consume this energy. And this usually expressed as a change of temperature of water samples. And we see here exactly at the time of the influence, we see also a change of thermochemical reaction. And usually this thermochemical reaction, there is a kind of evidence for quantum nature of these parameters. And we also can analyze this with psi and probe value, and we see here a completely different pattern of these changes. Okay, I stopped my sharing. So if I conclude, in this case, we use a standard technology, this standard impedance technology of optically excited water samples. And we use a kind of scientific methodology. We express a hypothesis, we analyze a local condition, and we perform sampling by multiple devices, or we accumulate large statistics. And based on this data, we see a clear correlation between the time of the experiment, where people focus their attention, and electrochemical and thermochemical reaction of water samples. Okay, that is more or less the whole story about this experiment.
That was amazing. Anton, do you want to chime in and elaborate a little bit on
like add a little bit. First of all, thank you, Serge, for processing those results. Usually, when people see results on AquaPsy, it's not so advanced results you can see compared to what you can achieve by manual analysis, but that's like complicated to do. So far, we have on the platform, after session is finished, maybe a personal session or group session, you would see only one graph, which shows you background measurement 1.5 hour before session started, and then what was happening during the session, by 30 minutes. So it's like simplified way of representation. Serge did like bigger work and analyzed that device, other devices, and we saw that there was change because we saw that before the experiments, samples were stable, and during our session, they changed their values. It was really like interesting experiment, and so far it's we had the biggest amount of participants compared to what we had before. During that live video, like everybody watched, we had about 170 people, plus minus, and then totally, I think it's about like a few thousand or 5,000 people watched the video, so we had really good amount of people concentrating their attention on the sample. Even we didn't tell people to maybe try to decline with your intention, where graph should go, etc. We're just sending positive energy or something to the sample. It still like worked, and it will be very interesting to conduct more of those experiments in future. And we will be doing that each 11th of the month, and it will be super cool to collect the data and have some more statistics, to really verify whether people's concentration can affect water sample. We're really excited to continue this experiment. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Anton. Jeremy, you want to chime in on that since you participated in that and what your thoughts were on that?
Yeah, so I think a little bit of reiteration and maybe kind of reducing it down into layman's terms will be useful for the general audience. To just kind of reiterate what Anton and Serge were saying. So what Serge presented was pretty much a detailed manual analysis of the probability and the psi values, basically confirming the effect and the environmental conditions being stable within the experiment, and that is a clean experiment essentially. So like any kind of scientist who wants to go in and look at the back end of our data and really start to see what the corresponding measurements are to the actual effect, they're going to want to see all of these parameters. And so this is the due diligence that in the scientific work that's going on in the background. So for example, we ran the public experiment on AquaPsy platform. It's a little bit more of a stripped down results kind of logic for the average audience member. And so what we've done is we've set up a probability and a psi value, which basically just gives you an idea of how you're scoring in terms of your effect on the system in general. And so I'd like to kind of pull up the data one more time and just kind of give another look at everything in terms of a more layman's approach, because from my research perspective, that's kind of how I usually see things, and then I have to kind of go in and confer with Serge and Anton to really kind of peel back the layers more scientifically. So let's kind of take a look here. I'll do a quick screen share. One moment. Absolutely. Let's see. Desktop. This is okay. And sharing now. You guys able to see my screen here with the results? Okay. So, and you can see my mouse kind of moving around. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you look here at these charts on the top line here, this represents basically the electrochemical impedance dynamics that are happening within the system. So you have within the water samples 2 electrodes, and within the electrodes, there's an electrical potential that's building around the electrodes. And in fact, there's all kinds of different effects that are going on electrochemically, like there's a double layer effect building around the electrodes. And really, essentially what that is a very, very sensitive system to measure any kind of electrochemical and physiochemical changes within that system. So it's a very standardized way to measure very, very subtle effects. And so when we're looking at these different parapsychology phenomena and different types of ether sciences and things like that, we're actually measuring systems that are very much on these subtle level effects. So it makes the system that we're working with very efficient to measure these subtle effects. And so you can see here, there's a background measurement that's been taken for a period of time, and the system is actually, if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Serge, but the system, while it's going through its electrochemical changes, it's absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere. And at some point, it pretty much saturates and becomes balanced. And so you have a really fine balanced system at which you can make a change on. And so that's really the balanced system here, I believe. It's absorbed as much CO2 and ions as the system can kind of saturate at. And then it's really open to an effect at that point. And then so in this gray area, you see that this is the impact window. And in this impact window is when we're live on the AquaPsy platform. We show the water sample, and then people actually send their effect consciously, non-locally at a distance to the water sample. And you can see there's actually an electrochemical reaction within the system. And so with that being said, there's also some other phenomena that we've kind of seen here, and obviously you can see the effect. There's a difference between our controlled background measurement and our affected measurement. But during the impact, the change is starting to occur, right? But what's really interesting about these electrochemical phenomena and reactions is there's a quantum effect. There's these phantom and quantum dynamics, which Serge was describing in his earlier presentation in the beginning of the call here. That there's almost this fungibility or this latent dynamic. So when the system is reacted upon, it starts to build in terms of its effect. And you can see here in the back end, in the post measurements, you can see the actual curve is continuing to express itself. So that's very interesting to us because it kind of shows the quantum dynamics and the phantom dynamics that happen within our system. Same thing over here on the second chart up top. You can pretty much see the same thing, stable background measurement. And this is on the non-public device. And so essentially we have the device that's being presented to the public, right? It's the affected system that we're looking at affecting, and then you have the non-public. And what's interesting about the non-public is the fact that we're still measuring an effect on the quantum system. So it shows there's a quantum entanglement dynamic happening between the system that's online being affected by the observers, the conscious observers, and the system that's not. It's hidden in the background. So what this means from a scientific level is it's another control for us to measure against. It really shows that we have the opportunity to measure and have another measurement to show that there is efficacy in what we're actually showing in our readings. So that's how I perceive that. And then let's see, the thermochemical reactions. Actually, what I'm going to do in a minute, I want to have Anton talk a little bit more about what the psi and the probability measurements are in terms of how that scores and how that plays into the actual value of what we're seeing in terms of the effect, because I think we need a little more detail on that. But I want to show you one more thing in terms of the background measurements that Serge was talking about. Here, let me pull those up just one moment to another screen share. Okay. All right, and you guys can see my screen here?
Yes.
So these are all the environmental conditions. So essentially, it's those environmental sensors and conditions that most scientists are looking for in terms of setting up a very well-balanced, controlled experiment. So we're not just measuring one marker here. We have a whole set of markers that we can compare against. And so everybody's going to want to be looking at these environmental conditions. And so, for example, within the electrochemical change that we're affecting within the system, what's dynamically tied to that is any kind of change that we're going to see electrochemically, we should be able to correspond it with a thermodynamic or a temperature type reading. And so we're looking here at the temperature reading at the top chart here. And what we're seeing is a very well-balanced curve. We're not seeing any bumps like we saw in the affected system. So that really shows you that the system was very well-balanced thermodynamically. And it also kind of gives you an idea that we're able to measure an electrochemical effect while still the temperature change is stable. So that goes back to this whole quantum dynamic. We should be able to see a change correspond with the two compared with each other, but we don't. We see they're different. So I'd like to talk a little bit with Serge about why we see no change thermodynamically, but we do electrochemically. And then so just kind of going through the rest of the charts, you know, this is the radio frequency power. So like Serge was saying, there's no cell phones in the environment affecting the system. So it's a very stabilized environment. And then, you know, the power supply and the energy that's going through the circuitry while the measurements are being taken, it's a very common curve that we're seeing here. Air pressure dynamics are being measured, and we don't see any kind of augmented state during the impact of the measurement. So that's all balanced. And then also here at the bottom, this is the magnetometer, which an accelerometer, which is measuring the magnetic fields of the environment when the experiment's happening. So to reiterate once again, what these environmental measurements mean is that the conditions were very, very stable during the effect. So it makes for a very clean experiment in terms of when we compare the data that's been shown in the electrochemical reaction. So with all that being said, I just wanted to kind of ask real quick if Anton can discuss with us really quickly what the difference is between the pro value, the psi value, and actually how that translates into a measurable, quantifiable system.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, as you mentioned, on the AquaPsy, for example, we use a little bit simplified way of data representation, only one graph and few numerical parameters. I also will share my screen now to show that slide I already used sometime before in presentations. This graph is not from our experiment we did on 11th. It just graph a long time ago, just to demonstrate what psi and pro values means. Again, this is a typical graph you would see if you did successful experiment on the AquaPsy. It just shows electroconductivity of both channels of the same device. One of the channels is targeted channel, but again, like sometimes even not targeted channel can impact, and that's why we're mostly considering as a control, not the control channel, because we're noticing that they are becoming both entangling, and if you influence in one channel, some another channel can react. So the control here would be the ground measurement. This is the best control I think we have so far, is just to look whether the device was stable before. And usually on AquaPsy platform, system automatically chooses the most stable device for the influence. So those lines should be pretty stable before you started your influence. And then after you started influence, if your influence was strong enough to have an effect, then you would see that one of the lines, or maybe two of the lines, decline. So besides the graph, we also have numerical values. It's psi and pro. What is psi? Psi technically shows how strong was the influence, how much your targeted channel declined from this baseline. And even the more important value is pro. It shows probability that your impact was random. So the maximum pro value is 1. If you get 1, it means that pro or psi value was just achieved randomly. It's not a significant effect. If your pro value is close to 0, then it shows that the probability of impact, random impact, was almost 0. Your impact was not random, it was significant. How it's calculated? It's we have also passive sessions before your active session, because device always running, and we have the data when nobody influencing, and we know what psi values are in those experiments. And then we know psi value in your experiment. We compare those values and see, yeah, your psi value wasn't like so big compared to previous one. Then your pro value will be high, like about like maybe 1 or 0.7, showing that your effect was not significant. If your pro value may be lower than 0.5 or even better, closer to 0, means your effect was significant because your psi value compared to passive stations were pretty high. Yeah, that's how we show. And again, all of this platform in development, so we try and more understand how things works and how to analyze data how to remove different noises or other disturbances. So it's kind of work in progress, and yeah, we're working on this to provide better feedback for people.
And just thank you, Anton. And just really quickly, I just wanted to just jump into the quantum dynamic effects and how sometimes we see a latent effect, a latency, and so we'll make an impact, but the system will kind of show a latent effect. And so what does that mean for the whole quantum dynamics within the system? Serge.
Yeah, the better for Serge.
Okay, Anton and Jeremy, many thanks for explanations. Just one short comment from my side here. There is a lot of publications, lot of applications note. All what is said here, it can be read in more details, and it's only a short, let's say, a few of them, but currently I think it's much more. Okay. And Jeremy, back to your questions. Can you repeat?
Yes, just can you just speak upon the whole concept around phantoms and the quantum dynamics of sometimes the impact that we're making within the effect is sometimes registered outside of time. Sometimes we see a pre-effect or a post-effect around those impact windows, almost like there's a fungible dynamic in exchange of time for effect. It seems like a quantum dynamic effect, a causality.
Yeah, okay, I see. Yeah. Let's say a short explanation. We try to avoid this, general quantum things, because you can explain everything with quantum. Yeah, now. So if we have some quantum effect, and we try really to justify it, and one of this quantum effect, what we assume what is happening, is a proton tunneling effect. It's quite well known. It's over 100 years as known effect what is happening in water. And for instance, all the strong jumps in the dynamics normally are explained by proton tunneling effect. So, about probably then this explanation with these graphs again. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes, good, very good. Okay, Jeremy, what you said, that's exactly here. We can see this main session, but after session we observe a kind of oscillation. And usually this oscillation happens through two reasons. The first reason is purely numerical reason. First, if we measuring here, then we perform again a nonlinear regression. So this graph is a nonlinear regression graph. And we demonstrate here a residual curve. Through nonlinear regression, these changes, they are going here is a way up trend. Then in the next, we will see a downtrend. Then the next iteration, this always measuring iteration by 30 minutes. So in the next iteration, this changing again. So we see here, in fact, this changing amplitude of, let's say, changing peak values. And this is a numerical reason, and this is exactly why we analyze not only the main session, but also two post-session, just to see whether through this effect we will capture a stronger effect in the post-sessions. Or for instance, here we see that in the previous session there was, let's say, a wave. And this wave influence, of course, numerical regression here, and that can happen that this peak will be slower only because of appearance of this peak before. And then the much effect will be visible either in the first post-session or in the second post-session. This again effect through numerical regression analysis. Well, Jeremy, you said that this, for instance, this peak could be explained by the Ampere effect, so in quantum, let's say, terminology, some event that can happen before we started, but it's already happened somehow, And if it happened, then, well, we try to avoid this basically because we are not really sure what is, sometimes we observe it, sometimes we do not observe this. But post-effect happening mostly in after the main session. It was observed really a huge number of times. There is a lot of publication by different authors. And this effect says that if you have a strong effect here, then this effect will be manifested a few times in the dynamics. So it's a so-called post effect. And by analyzing 2 sessions in the AquaPsy and in the normal analysis, we try to pick up this effect as well. So that's a short explanation about why do we analyze post sessions.
Excellent. And if I could just make a quick summation on that and pass it over back to Lindsay to take us through the panel here. I have a quick layman's analogy that I'd like to share, if that's okay with you guys. I could show you a little bit of a video here that actually kind of ties us into some experiments that Masaru Emoto had taught us, years ago in terms of, the 2 tuning forks that are in resonance. If you hit one and the other one is in resonance or tuned to the same frequency, it will resonate at a distance. So you're setting up a resonance within the system. If the 2 tuning forks are distuned to each other and you hit this one will not resonate. So I have a quick video and with that kind of in mind that I just want to share with you. It's real fun. And it's just a kind of a layman's physics approach to understanding what's going on when we're seeing the impact, and then the impact kind of has this building latency effect. So I want to share that with you just really quick.
While you're finding that is, when I first met Dr. Emoto, within the first hour that I met him, I had picked him up at the airport and I was bringing him back to his hotel room, and he pulled the tuning forks out of it was like a doctor bag. And he did the experiment for me, and I just didn't really understand it at that moment. And when he put it down, he said, "You and I, we resonate." And so that was really, but this is a really great example, Jeremy. So I like these kind of demonstrations. Thanks for pulling that up.
Okay, just this will be really quick. And so keep in mind, we're going from like the physiochemical, microscopic into the macroscopic physics now, which they're a bit different, but I think the analogy can be appreciated from all of us. And that's it. Just kind of a quick little idea that shows that, the impact that we're making on the system, although it's just kind of a very slight reading, the amplitude builds over time, and there's this latency effect. So I thought that would be fun to share that with you guys. And so passing it back to you, Lindsay.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. I love those kind of little examples because the micro is the macro, right? And so when we can dissect things like that in a way, it can really help people understand. And so I wanted to take a second now, since we were bringing up Dr. Emoto, is to bring in Kumunga and Yasuyuki, because they're from our Hado family, and they have, similar interest in this and also, but a different perspective. And so I'd like to start with maybe Kumunga, because then she could give a special intro to Dr. Nemoto and see what their thoughts are on this experiment and the results. So thank you, Kumunga.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Serge. Thank you, Anton. And thank you, Jeremy. That was super exciting to listen to and also to try to understand a little bit in depth of what you were explaining. And what I was reflecting on is that what you were explaining is what we call interdependence in kind of one word. So, and also I call it in my PhD research, I call it like the ripple effect. So all of these things that you touched upon and the both hypotheses that you were talking about actually kind of it's proof to show that we are connected and that we are interdependent with each other, and that basically from a mindfulness perspective, this is something that we try to show that people should understand this quite deeply, not in a philosophical perspective, because this affects everything. Well, first of all, myself, because I'm mostly water, and it also affects everything around us, because water is, blood of nature, like we spoke last time in the water ceremony, and we are mostly water, so our mental consciousness has huge effect on, first of all, myself, and then on everything else around me, on my family who are living in the same house, like you showed us the second hypothesis. So it's very important to understand this from a very general perspective. So, and then something little different that I've been working on is to also see, now you have been showing the experiment results from how our mental consciousness has an effect on water, and then how can we test this the opposite? So could we test that water element can have an effect on our mental consciousness? So for this, we have to a little bit describe from a neuroscientific perspective. So there are programs such as mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and mindfulness-based stress reduction programs where students go through an 8-week program, and then they've been tested to show that actually over an 8-week period that we can create new neural pathways. So this is what I've been kind of working on over my 10-year research period to see if water element, if nature-based practices, what if that we can create new neural pathways that are very helpful for us, and also what if we are able to understand nature better, and that we able to connect deeper, in a sense, in a deeper way with nature, and specifically with water, because through water we can learn so much, like we've just learned from you guys. And I think water can be a primary base in nature, primary element in nature, for us to understand how consciousness works and understand how the interdependent nature of phenomena. So that is kind of what I took from this. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise in this line of work. So I think I would like to now invite Dr. Nemoto. Dr. Nemoto and I met back in 2010 first at the Water Peace Conference in 2010 in Kyoto, and then followed by, I ended up, and I met Dr. Emoto for the first time then, and I expressed to him I really want to learn this technique of how our consciousness have an effect on the structure of water. And he said, come to Japan and stay with us for a month. and then the next thing I know, I booked a flight. 5 months later, I ended up in Japan. So, and then, as you know, Dr. Emoto is so busy. And at the time, Lindsay, Dr. Emoto was actually touring. So most of my time there, he was in the US, in fact. And then, so I was studying directly under Dr. Nemoto, who's here with us, and he was my teacher for the 4-week period. And he showed me how to use the camera and how to really do these experiments with the water. And I learned so much from it. In fact, it became then a part of my research. I used these beautiful water crystals as a form of meditation. So Dr. Nemoto, I'd like to invite you to say a little bit about your perspective of this experiment.
Thank you. May I continue my comment? Yeah.
Please.
Okay. The first, I really respect Serge's, experimental system, and I had an experience several years ago at the water conference, and so it's really, wonderful anyway, scientifically, of course. And I have some, kind of basic questions to Serge or about the experimental system. And because you prepared 4 public devices and 4 non-public devices. And I believe each device has 2 channels. And one of them, both of them are connected to water sample. And one of them, one of the 2 water samples would be a control sample, and the other is an experimental sample. Is this correct? And you are continuously monitoring the electrochemical impedance spectrum all the time using those devices. And my question is, because I believe in the session by the Lindsay, you showed one water samples on the screen. I believe only one sample, water sample, and there was a number on the bottle, I believe. And of course, I joined the session, but after 30 minutes, maybe I was in a dreaming state. But anyway, my question is, because you showed only one water samples, and so the people sent their love and gratitude to that water samples, basically, I mean. But you had 4 devices public and 4 other devices non-public. And I wonder, the water samples that you showed on the screen was one of the water sample, I believe. And in that case, my question is, to me, it's very important to shield the controlled water samples. Otherwise, it's very difficult to find the difference. Because you found even the effect you found in the non-local devices. That means that basically the effect will go into every devices, more or less. And so my point is, it seems to me that to shield the controlled water sample is quite important. My understanding is correct? This is my question.
So you guys want to explain how you set that up and how it chooses the channel and so forth?
I will try to reflect on this question. Many thanks. It's really a deep observation and is one of the really basic questions what we faced last years. Why, as a normal science, you're absolutely right. We have control and experimental. We keep control, safe, clean, and far away, and work with the experimental, and then we compare. And probably, okay, they are in the same local conditions, but here are only one experimental factor, and we can calculate, okay, what is the impact of this factor, the normal methodology. And we started with exactly this methodology. At least in my group at university, we started at about 2008, 2009 with this experiment. And we first used only one device. And like in normal case, we had control and we had experiment, and they are completely different. What we note, we use in those times 3 devices. If these 3 devices work at a long time together, as a long time in a few months, something like 8-9 months, then they become correlated. Whatever we do with one sample, we observe a correlation in all the channels. The simplest experiment was even published a few times with all this data. We took one of these devices. We have local setup, and in those times we were local setup and distance setup about 3 kilometers. And we took one of these devices from 3 and the distance of 3 kilometers. And we start working with this distant device. And we measured exactly the time if we change something in this system. And we observed in the distant system, in the remaining part, we observed exactly the same changes timely correlated with the main experiment. So they become somehow correlated. And then we observe what is the time if they still correlated. And they lose correlation in about 3-4 weeks. After 3-4 weeks, we do not see these changes. This effect was measured many times, and one of the, let's say, beautiful last experimental evidences of this kind is in China. In about 1 year ago, 1 or 2 years ago, they replicate experiment of Professor Montagnier with a sample properly, this is well published, and then they let's say, see the same effect. They use control samples and experimental samples. And DNA samples was assembled as the most intensively in the experimental samples, but they observe exactly the same changes in the control. So they was not able to distinguish between control and experiment. So this effect is well observable. We spoke, I was in the laboratory in China in Langfang, and we discussed with people how, what let's say, which attempts they undertake to split this control from experiment. And they use first one water from one bottle, then they use two different bottles, they use different teams, they finally use different laboratories, and you know, it's very difficult to separate. So, and we know about this effect, like I said, and we use instead of spatially separated control and experiment, we use timely separated. So we use as a control, we perform a continuous recording, and we call this passive sessions. And we don't care now what is control or which channel, but we care about passive and active sessions. And whatever is happening in passive sessions that create our baseline. So we know, for instance, in the time of, let's say, some astronomic events, a typical example, full moon condition. We even published this also many times in full moon condition, where we see a kind of much higher psi values. And the system in this passive session, they slowly adapt to the, let's say, astronomic event, adapt to some local changes, whatever. And this represents continuous, in continuous time, continuously changing control, and whatever is happening in the experiment, that happen in relation to this control in passive sessions. So just to make that in short, instead of having control and experimental as two split, let's say, samples, we use the same sample or many the same samples, but split as a control in passive session. They create our control, and active session, that is our experimental, let's say, session.
Oh, thank you for your explanation. But honestly, I think I did not understand 100%. But my simple question is because you showed the graphs, and in your graph, first graph with channel 2 and channel 1, and in like channel 2, the curve increased, after the session. And but the other curve, it's channel 1. Oh, I'm sorry, channel 1 is constant. And my simple question is, in this case, channel 2, the water sample of the channel 2 was the water sample that you showed on the screen on the session, right? Correct. Okay. Then second, my question is, the channel 1 is the water was placed somewhere else, which is hidden from the public, right? And of course, in this case, the measurement was done simultaneously. No, exactly. Okay, I understand very well. But in this case, the reason why the controlled water sample was not affected by the vibration is because, I don't know, there was no link or no entanglement, or it's kind of isolated. This is the reason, or correct? In the layman's terminology.
Anton or Jeremy also want to explain how you guys set that up with the channel and then the image and everything for everybody?
Yeah, before I pass it to Anton, because I think he's got a really strong layman's perspective on this. We talk about this all the time. And this really goes with the whole entanglement phenomena with water. And so I guess long story short, what Serge is trying to say, that when you're dealing with consciousness and ether phenomena, it's almost like what Eidstok Bentov would say is stalking the wild pendulum. It's a variable wave function. Sometimes the system will be affected, the water system will be affected out of 4 devices, it'll be more predominant in one device or predominant in another device. So what happens is this out of the online public devices, what happens is where there's the most stabilized system is what is automatically selected to be the actual channel for the effect. And Anton will discuss that. But I just wanted to kind of clarify what Serge was saying. So with that dynamic being said, what became to be more efficient for setting up a controlled experiment is that we're looking at time domain in terms of having a background measurement be the control versus the affected impact of the measurement, regardless of how many water samples and systems are happening within the local setup. And that really gave us a pathway forward in terms of how we can set up a control with such a fleeting system. And I could talk maybe in the future with you a little bit about some simple analogies about how thermodynamics like to entangle, and also the quantum entanglement phenomena within the proton tunneling effect within water. And so this is kind of like this whole, what we say, chasing or stalking the wild pendulum. You know, it's kind of like this thing where trying to quantify and control for is not so easy, but I think the way we've set up the background versus impact, no matter how many water samples are affected on site, we're definitely able to measure that and characterize that. So I don't know if that clarified, but I want to pass it to Anton because I know he's got an interesting perspective on this as well.
Thank you. Just quickly again, I also a little bit mention about this, that our control, we need to, currently what we understand is that our control is not another sample which we recorded at the same time, but the same sample which we recorded right before the session started. You know, that white part of the graph with white background. Okay, I'll just quickly show you again. You know, this element, we should, so far we understand that we need to consider this as our control measurement of the same channel. And this will be the test measurement. Yeah, because sometimes another channels react. Yeah, we're still collecting like lots of data to understand how it works. In our future experiments in large groups, which we'll be doing with WaterPeace project, will help us to understand like how exactly it works, how to build experiment, how to work with this, because it's really unusual to work with this like through the like online internet, gathering people's views and make sure they may be watching it like at the same time, so we have synchronicity and that kind of effect. Yeah, so we keep learning, and we really need everybody, like thank you for watching, you, I'm talking to you, you need to participate in the next one, and we need to have more people, like bring your friends to participate, because we want to like have more people and see how it works. And yeah, please try to join exactly when the this video, like next video, next ceremony will be live, so we have people watching at the same time to make this experiment more reliable.
And Anton, if you could just really quickly, I just want to peel back the layer just a little bit more to help clarify kind of what Yasuyuki was asking. In terms of how the measurement sample was selected, because you only saw one sample pop up on the screen.
Yeah.
So that's a really important aspect that we need to discuss. For
yeah, how it works on the AquaPsy platform. Serge mentioned currently he provided us with 4 public devices. So we collect data from all those 4 devices at the same time. And if you go on the platform, book the session, then right before your session starts, system select which channel is more stable for the influence. Because we know some channels like water live their own life, the dynamics sometimes so different, and we understand that for the best results, we need to select the channel which have lower these variations, like more stable background measurement. And system automatically select that kind of channel and provide that kind of entanglement link or image to that channel, so people or person can impact during their session. Yeah, so it's automatically done. We select one of like 4 devices, one of 8 channels for person to have an impact during their session.
Thank you, Anton. And just to kind of clarify, there's a regression analysis that's being done on the whole measurement time that we're taking into consideration all the background measurement and impact. And so that's how really, I believe, if Serge can clarify that shows you where the most stable channel is established, and that's how the system decides, okay, that's the stabilized channel, and that's the one that we're going to make an effect on. Do I understand that correctly, Serge?
Yes, absolutely. shortly, Dr. Nemoto, to your questions very, very briefly here. What Jeremy and Anton are saying, and what is one of these, let's say, consequence of this analysis is again this psi-values. Psi-value, it's more or less expression of how strong is this deviation is. Or it's just standard deviation from background measurement was divided by standard deviation in the experimental region. And this psi-value here in this graph, they are depicted every 5 minutes. So it's a scan of these psi-values. And all these psi-values, they are in passive sessions, so there was no impact. And they are considered now as a control impact. So we built a kind of probability distribution to find some values, psi-values in a specific region of values. So, and we consider this as a probabilistic distribution. Yeah? And now if we perform a session and discover these high values, we calculate for them probability based on probabilities of evidences in passive sessions. So, and for instance, like Anton said about these pro values, for instance, these are low probabilistic values. They are mostly obtained by a random process, but this value is very high, and the probability of obtaining this value is 0.0008, something like this. So, and just my point, we consider in the time domain all these passive sessions as a control, and we consider at least 24 hours. It's about 50 sessions. And based on this 50 sessions, we build a probability distribution. And then we just decide, okay, what is the probability if we perform active session and we see some C value, we can calculate a probability value for this for active session. And so based on this, in fact, our experiment is a kind of probabilistic estimation to find this deviation in specific probability range. So it's more or less some explanation about control.
Yeah, I think I understand the the graph of channel 2 in the first graph. I mean the graph started to increase at the session. I understand because before that, of course, it could be thought as a control. Then it increased significantly. That's okay. I understand it. But my question is in this case, channel 1. In this case, it was just a different channel. And it is connected to another water sample. My understanding is correct? Yeah. At the same time? Oh, then the people just sent their love and gratitude to one of the water samples. Correct? Yeah, okay. And the other one is just it's very close enough to each other. But so it was channel 1 and channel 2. Is it correct? My understanding. Okay. Then just one more comment is because in the graph you showed about the non-public. I was very much. I felt very interesting because the curve started to increase at the 0 hour. I mean at the hour. At the beginning of the session. But I believe that Lindsay asked the people to send their love and gratitude after, I don't know, like 15 minutes or 30 minutes. Not exactly 0 minutes. But the graph started to increase at 0 minutes. That means, it's my interpretation is that because people are, already imagining that they are going to send their love and gratitude to the 0 minute subconsciously somehow. But consciously, they were guided by Lindsay's meditation, which was not 0 minute, but after 15 minutes or like that.
The sample was on the screen the whole time also, so we had it placed in the corner the entire time.
Oh.
And then we flashed back and forth when it was being spoken about and it was relevant. We had it.
Okay, so the people were already watching the water sample
It was on the screen the entire
I
time.
see, I understand.
From the
Okay.
very beginning, in fact, Lindsay did mention
Okay,
about
okay,
the
all right, yeah.
So
I think
Oh, no, yeah.
I think what's your question, that technically we just provided results of the graphs of three samples, two samples from that one device, and one of the sample was targeted. So that sample reacted. The sample which was right near it didn't have big reaction. And then another device from non-public sensor reacted. So your question, like, why technically the sample which was near our target sample not reacted, but channel which was a little bit further, it's reacted. So how come like these two kind of what not entangling?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and another one kind of like got effect. So what determines those things? So like why it happened? Kind of question. Do you know, Serge, any ideas?
Yes, this is another very good question. Just observation, we use this multiple sensing by multiple devices already a long time. And for instance, in the previous setup, we used 3 devices by 3 sensors. So in general, 9 different sensors. And we recorded all these dynamics. And we always said, okay, that 4 sensors from 9, they will not work at all, well, whatever is the reason. And we just discard all non-working sensors. They was always random. And why they are random, we cannot explain. Sometimes it's a matter of electrochemical dynamics. The device become non-sensitive. If there is some spike, for instance, it's for a while, I don't know, a couple of hours, it's not sensitive. It's one reason. Another reason, probably some non-local condition, because we know only a little about this, why it's happening at all, we don't know. But at least we know from 9 devices, and we experimented many years with this setup. We know that 4 devices from 9, and always different, they don't work, but 5 of them, they will work. And now if we, for instance, consider as a 5 from 9, and calculate probabilistic values, then we are in the good probabilistics. So for instance, if 5 devices reacted at more or less exactly at the same time, strongly correlated with the distant impact, then probability that the random event is very low. So back to equation to this setup, why reacted, for instance, all these devices are placed in a small laboratory, about probably 10 square meter or something like this. So they are really in the range of probably 1-2 meters from each other. And why some of them reacted more strongly and some other not, we currently cannot tell it's exactly. So it's just our hypothesis.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so I mean, really, this is the crux of the enigma. This is probably like the holy grail of what we're getting at within some of the phenomena with our experiments. And so what we've done is we've just kind of been touching upon what's most tangible in terms of control and showing results and an effect. There's still a long pathway in terms of theory and even characterization. And so the more we can run these experiments and build the data, then we can start to actually bring out a little bit more definition and logic around answering questions like this. These are really, really good questions, Yasu, and not so easy to answer.
Oh, thank you. So my understanding is that because of the past experiences in each devices, their system are somehow entangled, more or less. This is what happened. And also I believe the water is somehow already entangled with each other, basically. So what I felt from this experimental result is it might be difficult to have a control which is not affected at all. This is my feeling, So fundamentally, we are all connected, as Dr. Emoto told us. So anyway, it was very interesting and inspiring experimental result. Yeah, I thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
If I may, just really quick, I think I would love to get some perspective and insight on some of the water crystal work that you had done with Kumi and Emoto, and how did you observe some of these phenomena in your experiments and work with the water crystallography work? I mean, how easy it was to control for those experiments, and how did you set up controls and how did you set up methodologies to support, you know, a really strong experiment? Because I know that can be a challenge.
Yeah, I think so. So, yeah, again, you know, how to establish the control is a difficult thing, I think. Yeah.
I was
think
asked
for
the
me,
same question actually.
yeah, I think
about
I'm going to go back to experiment that I did for Lindsay, the time that I was in Japan. Lindsay gave me, at the time, she was producing these bottles called love bottles. Can you remember, Lindsay? Back then, you were in Japan, and you gave me this bottle, which the bottle had all this beautiful kind of the word love or different words written on it, and it was a glass bottle. And I was actually touring in Japan at the time, so I filled this bottle with a spring water from wherever I was at the time. I can't remember exactly the point, near a Buddhist temple.
shrine.
Exactly, from the shrine. And then I brought it back, and I put half of the water into a plastic bottle, and I kept it for 5 days. This was, so basically I just wanted to see if there was any difference between the plastic bottle versus the glass bottle. And I definitely saw the difference. And it wasn't, it was kept in the same room. And after a while, there were the water crystals in the sample, which was kept in the plastic bottle, were many of out of the 50 sample, many of them were disordered, and the glass bottle, it was a clear difference. Most of them had clear, beautiful crystals. So I thought that was really interesting because I'm not from background, I'm not a scientist. I've always had an interest in science, but my main interest is obviously in neuroscience. But to understand this kind of effect was important to me. So one of the experiments I also did was sending my love and gratitude to everyone who helped me to be in Japan at the time. And we had a heart crystal, which came from their sample, and it was like the first experiment I did by myself after Dr. Nemo taught the experiment, and that was super excited. And when I was seeing this heart crystal, I couldn't believe my eyes, number one, because I was still again in question mark if this would work or not. So, and I forgot I had to like photograph it. And then immediately when I realized that you better capture this, I did. So that sample, again, I still have the samples, by the way, Dr. Nemoto, from the entire collection from Japan, and I look at them now and then. I really treasure the time that we spent in Japan, because it was truly eye-opening, heart-opening, that's how I could say. Changed my world and how I perceive everything. Yeah.
I remember the heart-shaped water crystal that you took.
Yeah. And I remember showing it to Dr. Emoto at the time.
Oh.
And I remember him looking at it, and he took his time, you know, and it was very touching moment to share with Dr. Emoto at the time too.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I had the same question about kind of what Yasa was saying, but mine was like, is the water, like, how does it not store that information, and then where is it cleared upon? Like, in other words, it has access to all the information all the time, is how I understood Dr. Emoto's perspective. And so that's what I feel like you're asking, Yasu, is how are they separate from one another? But I think the real thing is we having such a large group and being so specific about directly looking at it that, you know, we're really targeting something really specific. We're talking about it, we're looking at it, we're focusing, you know, inside and out about it. So, you know, there's obviously a bigger picture there happening.
Yeah.
We're all fascinated by.
You know, and it's interesting too, Lindsay, that so the nature of the experiments that we're doing with water and the psi experiments and things like this, the nature of it is probability. And this is the future science of quantum computing. And the thing is like, how do you pin down that wild pendulum? How do you grab enough interest and information And as Emoto said, I think, you could probably quote this better than me, Lindsay, but if enough people come together and pray, then the amplitude will build and you'll see an effect. Well, how do you create enough controlled dynamic and probability to where you can gather enough effect and then show it, quantify it, and calculate it? And they're working on that problem right now in quantum computing. How do you pin down that charge and ground state and actually create enough probability to then actually assign a superposition of information a value? And that's stalking the wild pendulum. It's a thing.
It's a little obscure because it's all like the fact that it's entangled like that, but really that it's not, we don't necessarily need an entire group, maybe to make an effect and to make science based on that effect. But I know what drove me into being fascinated about this type of research and science is what I experience in my own self every day. The information that I receive and when I respond and listen, I mean, it's spot on. So I equate that to water and resonance. Like, what are we tuning into? And so I think it's really fascinating what we're doing. And we do need the group effect, and we do need all of you to keep joining us in every month. And the more science and data we have behind it, you could see and quantify it exactly. But I don't want to separate it from our own personal power, right? We still all have that regardless of, what's happening outside of ourselves. So
I have one thing to add, because after our group experiment, I did do some meditation sessions using your software, Anton and Jeremy. So that was pretty exciting because you can clearly see the effect of our mental consciousness on water from those results that I got personally, and also currently I'm running a 8-week program with the police officers in the UK. So I also tested it last Wednesday. I will keep testing that with that particular group. So we are kind of doing a reverse experiment where we are connecting with the water sample, but then we're going to meditate during the half an hour period. So I'm really interested to see how our consciousness, this meditation, can affect on water. So this is something I would love to see. I will continue with my programs, and I will continue to connect with your device in Germany. So I personally, one of the meditations that I did by myself was that I imagine, so in the Tibetan Buddhist practices, we have deity meditation. That means we imagine a compassionate being in front of us, and we try to develop these compassionate feelings with connecting with this being. So in this sense, I imagine this water sample in Germany was the compassionate being that I'm connecting with. And I did meditation like that. So I visualized that this water is filled with compassion and love. And I'm connecting with compassion and love in my heart. So that was really powerful for me to do that. So I think the device can be used as a meditation technique as well. So there are so many different, I think, perspectives here. So yeah, I'm really excited to be, working together with your device in Germany in the future experiments.
Wonderful, Kumi. And just to kind of add to that, so, it's really important to continue with these experiments. And I know, Lindsay's really spearheading an effort, and also you, Kumi, and your respective work to really continue on in building the data and to really just kind of have a higher value of N, right? The more N we have, then the more we can kind of pull out the resolution of the data that we're looking at. So the continuation of these experiments, sometimes you have a botched experiment, sometimes you have a successful experiment, but if you can keep lining up that N value, and the more value you build, then you can actually have a more quantifiable result, and so analysis of the result. And so science is always a progressive effort, and we're always kind of building upon information.
That's great.
Just a short comment. Yes, we have here in Germany a few local groups, and we use this instrumental feedback for training, also mostly for training, for development of these unusual capabilities of human consciousness, a lot of different techniques. Important is to have at least 30 sessions. So it's not only one, because one, there are many different that can influence you and then the device and the whole environment. So repeated at least 30 times, and try, I mean, different techniques like using symbols or people, you know, kind of exploration of this phenomena. So, and we observe clearly, we started this experiment about 1.5 years ago. We observe the training cars, so trainability of this effect is definitely here. And there's all this capability that can be improved by systematic training.
That's interesting, and that's what Kumanga's work is about, is practicing mindfulness, right? The more you practice, the stronger you get, and I think that's really, so you guys, can we finish the whole, go ahead.
It's so important because through this experiment, what, you know, you gathered all of us, international big group, to this experiment, and also clearly we can see the difference between one person's intention, the power of one person's intention versus the collective. It's very obvious how powerful we were together. So I think that is a really important point here too. Collective consciousness, the power of collective consciousness. Yeah.
What I learned in Hado school, they used a diagram like a pyramid, and at the top was three-dimensional world, and that is the mind and where we are here. And as the triangle would widen, that would be into the fourth dimension and subconscious, and the broader base of the triangle being fifth dimension and collective consciousness, but all being a part of one. And this was a question that they posed at the quantum medicine conference I went to with Dr. Emoto and all the panels of experts, which the question was, what is consciousness? And Anton and I have been chatting back and forth about it, and it's just a fascinating thing. And I feel like it's just, I feel like it's at one stream. That's why we have the ability to connect with things other than just human, in a sense. Like, I know I'm having a conversation with my dog when I am, so, and it's real. So, but I'm saying, like, I really believe, like, you can feel if you tune into it, and that's the purpose of the device and the training and of mindfulness. It's like a muscle. You have to use it to be able to guide it and use it for the greater good of yourself and the world. So that's really so important. So do we have any other questions before we kind of wrap it up? We've been talking for quite a while now, and I know it's late for Sergey, really late. I know we talked a little bit about, you know, why it's important in the future, but is there anything else that we missed on before we kind of wrap it up? Anybody have anything?
I think I can.
Jeremy will have a Sunday seminar.
Yes.
Jeremy, can you please briefly tell about the seminar?
Yeah, so the seminar will be in conjunction with the Cybertronica research group, which I just kind of wanted to touch upon. That if you were in on kind of our back-end email threads, you'd be surprised. There's some of the greatest water researchers on an academic level interested in the work that we're doing and our community's building. Most of it based around the Conference on the Physics, Chemistry, and Biology of Water community. And so we're actively building interest around those communities. And so we're disseminating knowledge all the time. And so Sunday is part of that effort. We'll put together a little blurb here with Lindsay so she can give you some more information on that. So I guess what I wanted to say within that context is, yes, there's a lot of high-level scientific research going on around this work, and we're now just trying to reverse engineer ourselves into a position to communicate this with the public at large and the layman. And so you might have seen this conversation go from like way scientific to just maybe kind of starting to grasp it more like on the layman's end. And so that's kind of what this is. And I think Lindsay's really putting her best foot forward too, to kind of like rein us together and see if we can kind of bring something together to kind of communicate to, you know, the public that's just interested in the passion of water and consciousness. And so, you know, it's an ongoing effort.
Thank you, Jeremy. And actually, that's, I was going to get ready to tell everyone, is we did create a water science series, and some of you are watching us through that, but we're going to stream a lecture from the panel guests here, almost everyone that will be joining, so you can learn like more in depth about the work they're doing and how it relates to this subject. And so really, I'm so grateful for everyone, and it's so important. If you could just remind yourself, you don't have to be in ceremony or wherever you're with water, that you are the water. And I just think that's really important. So if you can check our page and also join us on the 11th of every month, we will be grateful that you will join and participate in our experiment and supporting the further of their research and science. So my sincere love and gratitude to all of you today for joining us. Thank you very much.
Just one more comment.
Yes, please, Yasu.
Sorry, because one of my dreams is to have a very handy machine, handy device, which can measure the vibration. Like, when I talk about the love and gratitude or Dr. Emoto's research on the stage, for example, if I have a device which can put on a desktop, and if the audience send their love and gratitude to the device, it is of course water-based, okay? And if they send the love and gratitude to the device, the meter will show like if they send hatred, then I believe the Serge can make this device. It's not a dream at all right now. So I'm waiting for this kind of device, commercially available.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you just really quickly. So the pathway to that is what we're doing now, because if we build enough data and characterize enough of what we're doing, then Serge will be able to go in and build an algorithm to account for all of the noise and the probabilities. And he will be able to dial in love and gratitude or hatred and pain or something. So perhaps, that might come one day.
That device, Yasu, until your dream comes true, there is a John Stewart Reed. He has his a cymatic device, and I think you could similarly conduct the same experiment with your group with sound. What if everyone is saying, when they're in tune? I feel like offering love and gratitude is like a harmonic vibration. And so that's the same way as if we are going, oh. And what's beautiful about his device is it gives back that feedback in shape and form visually. It would be a beautiful presentation. I mean, it's a little different than your dream come true, but it definitely could give you that effect of showing how that changes the shape of things and makes a difference.
Yeah, if you made this kind of device, I don't need to speak at all. It will show you that your consciousness will affect water. That's it. Science. Yeah, thank you.
That's true. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yasuyuki. Thank you for joining us. Serge, thank you so much for your work, your device, and all the things you're putting out for this, important work. And Jeremy and Anton, of course, everyone, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.